Hello and welcome to another Big Data London webinar. Today we're talking about future-proofing end-to-end people-based marketing. I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping notes. Like always, this session is designed to be interactive, so please ask your questions at any point during the presentation, and I'll endeavour to ask as many as I possibly can in the allotted time at the end for Q&A. There's also going to be a couple of polls during the sessions, which you'll be able to vote on using the vote button, which is next to your question button underneath the video stream. Finally, just in case there's any technical issues, there shouldn't be, but just in case, the best way to resolve them is just to hit refresh in the browser, and you should just jump straight back in to where you left us. I'm going to introduce the panelists now. So we've got Diran George from Treasure Data and David Keynes from Acxiom. So Diran is a senior solutions consultant at Treasure Data and has been solution selling and helping clients implement marketing and data technology products for over 10 years. He has a far-reaching portfolio of experience with marketing and technology. Welcome, Diran. Hi.
Hi there, Andy. Thanks for the introduction.
No problems at all. And moving on to David. David is Vice President of Product for EMEA for Acxiom and has been working with data and technology in marketing for over 20 years. During that time, he's worked across Acxiom's wide spectrum of clients to help create many different data-driven marketing solutions. So welcome, David.
Thanks, Andy.
Right, so looking at the title, taking a step back, future-proofing end-to-end people-based marketing, quite a lot in there. So I'm going to pass it over to David and he can start unpacking that for us. Over to you, David.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite a mouthful. I'm going to break that down, but let's start kind of from the back of it and work towards the front. So marketing. Hopefully I don't have to define marketing for the audience. It's that action of promoting and selling a business's products and services. But we've put that phrase people-based on the front of it. So we're emphasizing here that it's marketing activities that's informed by the fact there's actual, real, live human beings. There's people that are the recipients of the outputs of that marketing. It's people who are buying what the brand is selling. End-to-end comes next. End-to-end is a big one. So you can perhaps interpret that in a few different ways. End-to-end meaning that the people-based marketing activity we're talking about can occur at different stages of the relationship between the consumer and the brand. Very early in that classical funnel of driving awareness and consideration and starting to build that relationship and interest, through to purchases happening, hopefully through to driving brand advocacy, loyalty, repeat business as the relationship deepens. So end-to-end across that full life cycle with your customers, but also end-to-end meaning across the different types of channel and marketing activity that occur. One of the things we didn't put in that title was the word omnichannel, but that idea that that marketing happens in different channels, in different forms. That could be display advertising, it could be direct marketing, such as email messaging or SMS, or personalization of web or mobile experiences. So that view of end-to-end, I think, is part of the story here as well when we're looking at future-proofing. Can even maybe push that end-to-end a little bit wider and include measurement and optimization as part of that end-to-end story too, when we look at the different channels and activities. And finally, that first bit, future-proofing. So I kind of thought end-to-end was a big topic for just one webinar, but future-proofing. So how can we approach end-to-end people-based marketing in a way that's sustainable into the future? Given all the changes that happen in the marketing space, given all the changes that happen in the technology space as well, what are some of the key things to look at to make our approaches sustainable into the future? So that's a lot to cover in one session, and Diran and I are going to focus on a specific thread that links those four parts together: future-proofed, end-to-end, people-based marketing. And that's this idea of customer intelligence and that the knowledge that you have about your customers represented in your customer data is a vital thread in that strategy of future-proofing your end-to-end people-based marketing. So when I talk about customer data, I'm talking about everything from product sales records, information from point of sale through to website browsing behavior or e-commerce transactions, from mobile app usage data, from the logs you have on your mobile apps, if you've got them, to customer servicing records, knowing who's called customer services and what their problems were, how well those challenges were resolved by your customer services team. These customer data points represent the people that are your customers and the relationships with your brand. It's that the data is the representation of those people within your organization. It's that important. And it exists end-to-end across that relationship, from that very first touch point of an ad impression or a hit on your website. That's creating data. Sometimes you hear the phrase digital exhaust. It's creating those data signals that represent the interactions between that person and your brand, even if it's not all joined up today. And very few brands are able to join all of that together. These customer data points are also future-proofed in many ways. The technology might change. The platforms used by your customer might shift. Things like the pandemic have caused massive shifts in how consumers have used different technologies, for example, in the e-commerce space and in communications. But that fundamental relationship with your customer that's represented in that data, the trust and understanding that's gone into building that relationship, that's part of the future. That will always be there, even if the technology changes, even if the specific data points shift, that relationship is future-proofed. For most of my career, I've been helping clients use technology and use these types of data to better connect with their customers. And it's meant solving some really challenging customer problems. Customer data is very complex, and most brands have many, many touch points with their customers, each generating different data, different structures, different velocity of that data coming into the organization, sometimes quite variable data or quite poorly structured. And as these data are all about people, they're rightly governed by regulations such as the GDPR in the European Union. And these regulations differ across different markets. They differ in their interpretation, even when you've got a single regulation like the GDPR. And it differs across different organizations based upon their attitude to risk and data protection. Regulations also change over time. And then we have the marketers themselves. So hopefully I'm not going to upset any of the audience. Marketers are fantastic clients and stakeholders to work with. One of the really great things about working with marketers as our clients is they always strive to do something new, to use the next channel, to do the next best campaign, to work out what is the best thing to talk to a customer about next, to do this quicker, to do it faster than the competition. And because of that, the marketing technology stacks that support these advertising and marketing use cases can get very complex, and they can get very complex very quickly. And they also need to evolve rapidly. As technology has advanced, this is where customer data platforms have been created. The CDP Institute defines these platforms as packaged software that creates a persistent, unified customer data accessible to other systems. That's quite a short but quite dry definition, but it really covers a wide range of platforms. And I think maybe a picture might help to break this down. So I'm going to bring up a slide now. Now, this visual, it's going to take a couple of seconds to come up. It shows you those 4 key areas of functionality that customer data platforms bring. So collect is that ability to ingest data that represents your customers and their actions from across all those different touch points, end to end across that customer relationship. unify these data points together into a customer profile around a specific customer identity. Sometimes that's quite a simple thing. You might use an identifier that exists like an email address as something to build that profile around and to know and recognize who your customer is. But for some brands, it's not that simple, and there might be a complex rule set that incorporates a wide variety of identifiers, online and offline ones, that bring together a customer profile. Or you might have multiple levels of customer profile. You might have individual customers, and then you might also want to think about household groups or family groups that engage with your brand as well. Or maybe if you're in the telecommunications space or in the utility space, the physical property is an important part of that unification of data as well, because you might have a broadband service or an electricity power service coming into a building. Analyze gives the end users the tools that they need, both to do the kind of data science analytics work, modeling and segmentation, predictive analytics, but also from a campaign decisioning perspective. How do you know what's the most important, the most appropriate communications to do to each individual based on your understanding of them? And that activate kind of functional block. How do you activate these audiences and decisions across all the different places your customer engage with your brand? Everything from digital advertising to website personalization and customer servicing. So 4 areas which are kind of fundamental to what you need to do with your customer data. But there's a lot of different approaches to delivering those 4 functional areas. And depending upon the technologies chosen, it might focus on providing a data-centric capability, building out a data layer, might focus on more of the analytics and data science, might focus more on the campaign segmentation, campaign execution, campaign management aspects of working with customer data, or might focus more on the delivery and activation piece. Maybe the technology delivers the communication, sends out the emails, does the website personalization, does the digital marketing targeting, integrates with Google and Facebook and other advertising platforms. So that's led to a lot of variety in the technical capability here, and it sometimes can get a little bit overwhelming. One way I like to think of it sometimes is a bit like cars. Like all customer data platforms have collect, unify, analyze, activate, all cars have a power source of some kind, usually a fuel tank, sometimes a battery. All cars have an engine and a drive chain. All cars have some kind of wheel, some kind of wheels on the road, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, sometimes more. Some way of kind of taking that energy from the fuel source through the engine, putting it into motion to activate it. And we all have different cars. Some of us even have 2 or more cars parked out in front of our homes, depending upon the use cases, depending upon the size of our family, the size of our organization, and what we're trying to achieve. And there's a wide variety of different technologies out there that work in this customer data space as well. And I think we want to dig a little bit more into that, right, Diran? The different technology thoughts that you have on how to look at a customer data platform.
Yeah, correct. Thanks, David. I think one of the things that typically happens when a brand or business is evaluating a CDP, like you've mentioned, there are many different facets to a CDP, but in terms of future proofing and in terms of planning for maturity over time and being able to take into account your sort of, I guess, unknown growth potential and growth opportunities for the future, what we tend to see is that a lot of things can be overlooked, especially when making a strategy for choosing a CDP. Now, and the reason why I say that is because all CDPs will do their job in terms of collecting, unifying, and analyzing, and also activating data. Like you've just mentioned, you can have data CDP, marketing CDP, or like delivery CDP, analytics CDP, etc. But I think brands should be looking beyond this much smaller scope when they're thinking about how do they then become future-proof, like I said, so that they're able to very quickly adapt to additional types of opportunities or challenges in the future. Now, I believe that there are three factors, concerning data management and CDPs that all driven brands really should be looking into in more depth before choosing then their CDP. The reason is because I think this will help them get the best value out of the choice in the future. And so, like you, I have a slide as well, just one to help summarize and visualize these points for the audience so that they can see what trying to sort of visualize here. But these are the things that the brands really should be asking about. So the first one, as you can see on the screen, is around scaling data. Now, what I mean by this is, as the brand grows and matures, can they freely import increasing volumes and variations of data, but not just volumes of variations, but also at velocity. So if you think about it, let's say, you might have lots of data today at the moment anyway, but as you enter new markets or new opportunities occur, are those data volumes going to increase? As the different types of variation also going to increase? Now, and what I mean by velocity as well is, we all know customers these days, they expect next level service in no time. And so you have to be able to react and also be proactive in that respect in terms of the types of data that you're collecting. So even brands today who don't think that they're collecting a lot of first-party data about their customers, whether they're CPG or retail or publishing or media, it doesn't really matter, because you have to start thinking about what is our business going to look like then in the next 10 years. So I mean, probably a lot of us on this webinar have seen the exponential growth of data that's been captured just in the last 10 years alone. This could be attributable to obviously a shift in technology, smartphones, AI. There's so much more that could be on the horizon. So this is why I talk about the scaling of the data is being so important in this process. And additionally to that, another thing that's really important is, can also brands look back on and use historical data to make data decisions, key decisions going forward. So imagine a retailer, it could be a grocery retailer or, like a marketplace like Amazon, but maybe even one that's a little bit smaller. Imagine a retailer like with 10 years plus of loyalty data and transactions. Will they be able to actually use all of these rich insights with their CDP? So this is something that customers and brands actually should be looking into to make sure that actually it's not just looking forward, but even retrospectively, because all that data that you've captured beforehand is so valuable. It can help you make key decisions based on your sort of goals in the future. And the next point I want to talk about is around the enhancing of data. So we all know that manipulating data inside a CDP to perform things like ID resolution is one part of the equation, just so at least you can join all of your customer data together and effectively unify your customer profiles. But one of the things that tends to be overlooked is, can these brands start to enrich their data from multiple sources, regardless of the origin or the organization of the data? So an example of this being using second-party data from, let's say, demographic data solutions like Acxiom or LiveRamp, or even things like Experian, or even where maybe joint partnerships have been set up between a brand, a loyalty platform, or some sort of analytics platform. Again, this is what I'm talking about. Regardless of the origin or the organization of the data, can it be used to then start to enrich and enhance the data about your customers going forward? Now, additionally, can brands then start to utilize information from external influences as well? So rather than maybe just a data solution, but we're looking at systems and also the operations that happen outside of typically the control of a business. So it could be looking at things like seasonality and weather. It could be workforce attendance. It could be things like logistics, supply chain. There's lots of different types of scopes of data, which are, like I said, this external influences that could also be relevant to then the business to then drive key decision making in the future. And the last point I want to talk about is governing data. Now, can brands provide the right access of data to the right parties and also at the right time? So, and you can see on the slide, I've talked here about agents, and I'm not talking specifically about customer services agents. One might look at that type of definition, but agent could be any sort of body or some sort of process or system that needs access to data to then make its decision more pertinent. So this could be a third-party agency. It could be any sort of system or organization that you're working with. So how can hierarchical organizations with different divisions and brands and territories, and even things like user privileges, also give access at the right level of access to the right level of data at the right time, so that again, not everybody sees sensitive data. Maybe it might just be aggregated data. And another more hotly debated topic, and David, you mentioned this about like compliance, but it concerns compliance. I know it's something like a scary word a lot of people shy away from, but it's really important. So can brands then start to process privacy and consent compliance requests with their CDP automatically? Or even more importantly, can they do it easily? And that's three of the things that I think, really, really important when considering the technological impact of the type of data project or CDP implementation that you might be looking forward to in the future. Thanks,
Diran. So as brands are thinking about this, a big factor here maybe is also the maturity of the approach the brand has. And I think we've got a poll on that, right? And Andy, if you're there, can you kick off the first poll?
I can. I'm doing it now.
Cool. So I've got a slide as well that has the poll question and the answer options. So the question we'd like you to think on for a second is if you could rate your organization's current level of data-driven marketing maturity and customer centricity. The reason we're asking this question is we've got some research that has used the same question that we ran with 200 CMOs earlier this year. We just want to have a little bit of context and a compare and contrast here. Andy, is that poll running?
It should be, yeah.
Cool. Can't see anything on my end to know it's up. There's 5 options for you to rank yourself against. One is down at the lower level of maturity. There is no data governance, and there's a lack of team capabilities and tools, and a general view that you're not customer-centric in your marketing. Level 2, there's some informal data governance, some team capabilities, the tools required, but still not really feeling like you're customer-centric. 3, governance is well documented. Most of the team and capabilities are in place. Your organization does feel customer-centric in its marketing. Level 4 is a well-established framework for both data and customer experience governance. Team capability and tools are all in place. There's some dedicated individuals to customer experience management, and customer centricity is at the core of your marketing strategy. And then that level 5 is a robust and proven framework for both data and customer experience governance. You've got an advanced team with capabilities and tools dedicated to this, and it's integral to every part of your marketing strategy. So I think we're getting some results coming into that poll. Andy, are we in a place where we can kind of share the audience results yet?
Yes. So I'm not sure if it's on your console as well, but there's a little console. There's a little icon to the right-hand side with the poll results. If not, I can go. I can go over.
I can see it.
Thank you. Can see it now. If not, I can go over it myself. But there's some interesting results there. You might want to feedback.
Yeah. So we've got a bit of a W shape going on with the results, if that makes any sense. So the majority of the audience have put themselves in maturity level 3 here, which is about 37% of the audience. But then we've also got a spike up at level 1 with 25% of the audience saying that they've got no governance and lack team capabilities and tools. And then 18% have come up at level 5 maturity. And that's interesting because when we look at the research results, so Acxiom ran some research early this year. The panel was 200 B2C CMOs, and it was across the United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany. So there's kind of a few different markets there in terms of the scope of the research that we ran, and it was run in cooperation with the Martech Alliance. We found that 13% of CMOs were in that level 5 category. So it's about on par with the audience that is here today. So I think when you look at your organization and how you've ranked yourselves, definitely don't feel like you're alone. All the results I'm seeing on the screen here kind of align quite closely to that kind of wide panel of research that we did earlier this year. So it's interesting that it's kind of so closely aligned. One of the other key findings from the research, though, was how do you accelerate your journey through this kind of these levels of maturity? And we kind of got a clear signal from the research with about 70% of the CMOs believing that the kind of solid introduction or better management of their customer data and their customer data platforms would accelerate their level of maturity and their level of improvement. So that capability to being able to manage and use customer data effectively is really important when it comes to to the maturity that we're trying to rank here. I've got another quick poll we'd like to run. And if we can end that one, and if we can run the second poll, please. This one's a lot simpler, less to read. So yes or no answer to this one. So sorry, I'm trying to kind of polarize the audience here into voting one way or the other. How very Brexit of me, sorry. So this one is, does your organization already have the data marketing skills and knowledge to deliver your marketing vision? So this is really digging into the skill sets required, not the technology. And so if you can do your vote on that, it'll take a few seconds for the results to come in. While the results are coming in from the audience today, just to have a look at the research that we ran, we found that more than half of the CMOs that we interviewed believe that they lacked the data and marketing skills and knowledge to deliver against the vision that they had for customer centricity. I think when it comes to future-proofing your approach, if you've not got the right skills in place to even deliver what you have in your vision today, it's really challenging to then be able to adapt and pivot as circumstances change into the future. So trying to get that bedrock of skills and capability is a vital part of kind of being future-proof, being ready for the future. So getting results starting to come in. It's clearly more than half with this audience as well. It's kind of moving a little bit as everyone votes, but it's coming in around 68, 70% of the audience at the moment is saying that they don't have the skills there. At Acxiom, we've been helping clients for decades with that skill set challenge. As Andy mentioned in kind of introducing me, I've worked there for 20 years and we've built some really bespoke and complex customer data environment, customer data platforms for our clients. It's fantastic recently as working with partners like Treasure Data that we have here today, how the technology part of that challenge, it's shifted away from taking a kind of raw database system and ETL tools and BI tools and data science tools and trying to stitch the raw pieces together. And now with customer data platforms, you can accelerate through that stage and really focus on delivering value, delivering to the use cases. And we do that at Acxiom by having some really focused practices within our organization. And I think this relates back to getting skill sets in your own organizations as well. Firstly, the practice and capability around strategy and customer experience. Really understanding your data and tech strategy, like we talked about earlier, the strategy around your skills and enablement, training and advancing your people within your organization. Who are you partnering with, and making sure that that complements where you're trying to get, and understanding your use cases. We're going to touch on that a little bit more later. Second key area of capability is around tech integration. You can't get away from still having to do some tough technology work. Even with modern customer data platforms, there are still the operational systems that are providing those data sources and running the touch points. Everything from point of sale to websites and e-commerce platforms to a data lake you've been trying to build with your IT team for the last 10 years and it's never finished. All of these different areas, these different silos where data can reside, are part of that technology challenge and the integration, bringing it together. Third area of focus, I think, for skill sets is around governance, the non-functional piece. I'm kind of using non-functional in that IT way, not that it doesn't function. But I'm going to say my colleagues in privacy and security as well are part of that. Key vital areas, they're not actually part of the marketing, but without getting the program management, the project management skills right, without getting the data protection officer on board, without getting the data managed in a way that's secure and appropriate, they can all stop customer centricity dead in its tracks, and they can be really challenging when it comes to future proofing, because as we mentioned, regulations change, security practices change, and you need to keep on evolving with that. Finally, that fourth practice area, the end users themselves. Having the people in your organization or from partners that can use the tools to do the marketing, to do the data science, to run the campaigns. So those four areas of skill set: strategy, technology, governance, privacy, security, and then the end users, the people running the campaigns. And what we use when approaching these kind of projects with our clients is a framework of activities. The formatting on this slide is not quite right. So we've got CDP in the center there, so it looks a bit messy. But around that, there's a sea of activities that need to be addressed. Everything from understanding the existing capability you have through to how you're going to do the onboarding, the training, the ongoing support, the process change that might affect across your organization. I'm not going to talk through any of these in detail here, but if there's any specific areas that you want to drill into, maybe we can do that in the Q&A at the end. So Diran, this data and tech strategy and getting the implementation approach right, getting the skill sets right, are all key parts of future-proofing. But you've got some other considerations we need to think about, right? There's other pieces in this jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, correct. And one of the things that I just want to preface by saying is technology, of course, it's an enabler for change, but it's not the driver of change. It has to come either from hopefully innovation over necessity. But some of the effects of those changes can obviously be positive and negative on the business. But that drive of change, it has to be driven from the business itself and clearly communicated from the top down, percolate throughout the business. Otherwise, it's a project that could be doomed to fail almost at any point. I used to be an account manager, and I used to work with a lot of existing clients, obviously new clients. And I used to try and help them deliver as much value as possible from the solutions that they were using, as well as some other types of services that we could provide on top. And what I saw is that the most successful ones took on some practices to not only reduce the risk of project delivery, but also helped them and the organization thrive going forward. And I'll cover these as well in the next slide. So as you can see, that's loading now. And one of the things that's really important is around identifying use cases. So and use cases can stretch from multiple types of facets, right? But I think defining priority use cases, the ones which are really going to ultimately help your customer do better or perceive the brand better, is really what's going to be the most important to you. Because when you're establishing that relationship, if you can then make your customers more happy, you can start to extract the most value or ROI as early as possible, and realize that hopefully often as well from the type of technology that you're going forward with. It's not just the CDP, but in this case, with CDP, actually identifying what your use cases, your priority use cases are, but also looking at them at the current versus the future state. So how do you want your next generation use cases to be different, enhanced, better, whatever it is that you're looking to achieve as a goal. So the way I think about this is you can look metaphorically as this at having like two destinations. So you've got your current state use cases or customer experiences, and your future state experiences or use cases. Imagine if they're separated by water as well. So brands really should be asking, okay, how can we bridge the gap between current state and the future state? Now, is this going to be a data or a technology gap? Is this going to be a process gap, or maybe it's a people skills gap, like you've mentioned, David, or maybe it's a combination of one or multiple things? What will it take to actually change these so that we are achieving the goals that we've set for ourselves? And not only that, but can we achieve these goals and make these changes in a realistic and timely manner? So the next thing I want to focus on is around the KPIs. So, I've heard a phrase, I'm sure like most people have, I've heard the phrase, if you can't measure it, then you can't improve it. Some even say that if you can't measure it, then it must not even exist. And this is really super relevant to any project, if you ask me, especially one that's going to be delivered or any sort of project going forward. Now, the main question here the brand should be asking is, how are we going to make sure that this project or this implementation, whatever it is that we are going through, is going to be a success? Now, brands should be asking themselves like what metrics they want to track, how they're going to track them, and also why. So we're talking here the measurements, the methods, and also the meaning behind those as well. So without these in place, any transformation project, data or otherwise, will likely be deemed unsuccessful, or there'll be lots of challenges throughout the way. So a really interesting talking point. So even vendors like Treasure Data and Acxiom, we want to see these types of KPIs being implemented and measured by brands so that we can help prove our own success and delivering that sort of value for our customers. If they win, if our clients win, then we always win. That's ultimately how anything works. And finally, the last talking point is around then alliances. So I've talked a few times about this before, about how brands, need to be more collaborative internally, especially when, on projects, a transformative project like a CDP implementation. But I guess sadly, or I guess the majority or the reality for a majority of them, especially those that, at the beginning of their transformation, it's very difficult or it's very challenging to actually start to achieve this type of meaningful connections internally throughout all of the different departments. Now, something that I'm sure a lot of people on this call would have experienced is that this sort of interdepartmental disconnection, it can create missed opportunities and sometimes even potential infighting. So that sometimes a lot of key stakeholders through different divisions are left out of really important conversations or projects going forward. And this very same disconnection is what tends to confuse your own customers. So, it could be like your sales department might say one thing about a customer, but then the finance department says another thing about them. And then maybe the customer services team doesn't even have an iota of data about this customer. So they call in, they said, yeah, I've had all these twos and fros, and customer services, I'm really sorry. I don't know. Can you tell me, or I'm going to have to look through some records or call someone else. So this is almost always the reason for breakdown of communication in any project. Now, I just want to bring up one quote because I think it says it all, and it's a perfect segue into my next talking point. So as you can see on screens here, it says, great CX plus quality data plus driven people equals amazing global marketing. So if I go to the next slide, and this is really just wanted to cover a use case. So our client, AB InBev, so I'm sure a lot of you on the call will know, it's a big CPG brand, typically alcoholic beverages, but they coined this phrase, and I believe it addresses the abstract of this webinar most perfectly. So their digital transformation with Treasure Data, actually their journey began about 3 years ago, and it began with a relatively small pilot, but it was in an important region. and their team defined their priority use cases and were able to implement, excuse me, they were able to implement these types of use cases very quickly. That's owing to the fact that the organization in the team was superb, and also they were very goal oriented. And as well as that, Treasure Data's ability to mobilize and implement in an agile manner. And what I mean by that is not by doing everything all at once, but just taking some of their key priority use cases and helping them implement them very, very quickly. Realize that quick value or ROI that I was talking about before. So, I guess TLDR, but one of the main things that they were able to see over time, and almost immediately, actually, it wasn't even that long time, but with Treasure Data, they were able to see a 30% plus increase in ad efficiency. And that was just one of the key types of benefits that they were able to achieve. Now, of course, they've expanded their Treasure Data implementation globally, and they've been able to achieve data and marketing harmony. Now, it's not very likely that there are many brands on this earth that can say that they've been able to integrate 1,000 data sources in 50 countries with hundreds of brands, match, resolve, and unify profiles for 70 million plus customers, and achieve double-digit percentage ad spend efficiencies. Not only that, but Treasure Data is helping them spare their direct-to-consumer program. As I'm sure you're aware, with CPG brands, not a lot have started or even really developed a fully mature direct-to-consumer program. But this is an emerging practice, and Treasure Data is really helping to spare all of that. And all of this has really been driven from one platform. So, and this is a quote that they've said, it's not something that Treasure Data is attributed, but AB InBev actually said that, Treasure Data is their center of marketing. It's their key to how they will live in a cookieless world, in an even more digital environment, and still connect with their consumers. Now, of course, there are a lot of other cogs in this well-oiled machine. And actually, speaking of that, David, speaking of well-oiled machines, it'd be great to understand, how do we put all of this together so that businesses and brands are able to future-proof their people-based customer experiences, going forward.
Thanks, Diran. And I think that key thing from the AB InBev example you've used is that building for the future. That's how you future-proof. We want to draw out maybe kind of 5 of the areas we've touched on today. Firstly, when it comes to future-proofing, what you put into your data and tech strategy is really important. The selection of the tool sets, how you work with your data sets in your organization, the agility that you have there within the technology and the data, that's a key part of future-proofing. Secondly, the skill sets in the organization and who you partner with to support and to train and to bring in those additional skills that you might need. Having that flexible approach with partnering, again, really important for future-proofing. Third area, the use cases that Diran spoke about a few minutes ago. If you've not got the use cases you're trying to address, if you haven't prioritized them and got them clearly laid out in terms of a priority sequence, a roadmap of some kind for your data-driven marketing, it's difficult then to know how you want to change and pivot as things shift into the future. Fourth, the KPIs, that ability to measure and optimize. If you don't know what's working, it's very difficult, again, to move into the future with confidence. And finally, the mindset across the organization, that the ability to form alliances outside of marketing within your own organization, all that will help with future-proofing and building that agility that leads to that well-oiled kind of marketing technology platform. Andy, I'm not sure, do we have any questions that have come in that you want to ask before we wrap?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions that have come in. We've got probably 10 minutes, so if you've got any further questions, do send them through with the question box as well. Also worth mentioning, there's an attachment section which is below the screen here, and in there you'll find some resources that the guys have been discussing earlier, including those surveys and etc. So before I'll crack on with the first question. You mentioned a bridge between ad tech and Martech for acquisition. how does the CDP support paid media channels activity? I'm going to put that to you, David, first, but obviously chip in, Diran, where appropriate, obviously.
Sure, yeah, I made some references to the different kind of channels that get involved, everything from kind of paid media through to that kind of direct marketing. And I think that bridging from when you know a customer and they might have kind of made a purchase, you've got kind of the traditional PII to identify them. How do you bridge that out when you're looking at, okay, how do I link that with the customer experience ahead of that point? Or how do I use that information to inform from an acquisition perspective is really challenging. And it's an area where Acxiom's been working with customer data platforms in the past year to advance capabilities there. Firstly, one way of doing it is how you build your audiences for paid media. You can use the insights that you have from your existing customers as a key way of introducing seed audiences into modeling techniques to create those acquisition audiences to start with. And I think the second piece is how you link from the paid media into your owned media experience as well. So one of the technologies Acxiom has within our identity suite is called RTag, and that allows you to tag both the paid media and your own media with the same tags, and it synchronizes up with your customer data platform like Treasure Data behind the scenes. And that way you can see, as long as the consumer is opted in from a permissions perspective, you can see that full journey they've been on, what media have they been exposed to, and how has that led to their engagement on your owned media as well. So it joins things up across both sides. That's obviously controlled by consumer consent to make sure it fits with the regulations in different regions, but it's certainly possible. So there'd be the two kind of areas I would look at: the building of the audiences, and then how do you close that loop round for a measurement and optimization perspective, and RTag is a great way of doing that. Diran, did you have anything on that media side as well?
Just the process to actually unify from, let's say, the Acxiom to Treasure Data side, it's very, very similar. We have this sort of synchronization process, typically with cookie syncing, but there are loads of ways that we can actually stitch and unify the profile from, let's say, an ad tech back to the CDP. So it's very, very similar, but nothing really just to add in there.
And the other thing I think from my perspective on it, and so Acxiom is part of the Interpublic group of companies, and that includes a number of really large kind of media agencies and creative agencies within that group. And I think that's really important as well when it comes to the kind of the alliances that Diran spoke about, how it's still so often that we encounter clients where the people with access to the customer data don't have regular communication channels with the people doing the digital marketing or doing the acquisition work. It's still amazingly disjoint within organizations. So working out how from an organizational structure, how things can shift to bring better alignment between what's happening in acquisition and what's happening in customer kind of growth and retention, I think is important there too. It's kind of, Diran, you said it's not just about technology. Technology is the enabler. If your organization is still fractured, it doesn't matter what the technology does. You're not going to be able to join up acquisition with customer retention.
Perfect. So we've got a couple of questions about skills. I think probably from the poll question that you put in. One of them is around the sort of team structure. I thought this was quite interesting. What sort of team structure, or what sort of people, I suppose, specifically do you need when you're implementing a CDP?
You need me and Diran. You need us.
Yes, yeah, we are the dream team. But I can take this one because I've talked a couple of times with prospects about this very same topic, and the reason why is because we've been able to see how it works with our more successful clients. But what they typically do is they build up a task force, so like a team of maybe 3 or 4 people that either might work regionally, or maybe let's say it's an AB InBev with lots of different territories and lots of brands. but they typically have 3 or 4 key roles which tend to be mirrored throughout all those different teams. So the first one is going to be the project sponsor, or somebody who is not quite the PM themselves, but somebody who then regularly talks with the, let's say the exec board or the C-suite to talk about the objectives that are going to be implemented and why, and also the measurements and how that's going to affect the bottom line. So this, if you imagine me going back to the slides where I'm talking about the KPIs, that project sponsor effectively works to put all of that information in a digestible format and present that to the exec team. But it typically helps if that project sponsor also understands the sort of inner workings of a CDP, somebody who might have some CRM experience or something like that in the background, because ultimately they have to understand the types of programs that could be implemented with a CDP going forward. So I think that number one person, the project sponsor, is really, really important, because without that connection of like how a project is going, how it's going to be, value is going to be realized, then as David just mentioned, it's just going to fall apart. But if we look at the actual operations team within that strike force, then that could really be made up of a couple of people. So a data architect is always really, really useful. So somebody who understands, how to model data, how to query data, how to build a sort of new, like a data model or data repository, whatever it is. So experience being typically with, databases, with things like data stores, even like cloud technologies is always really useful, because they can start to, put all of the technicalities of that project together. I wouldn't say easily, but at least they'll understand, the process behind it that needs to happen. The second thing that is really useful then is to have a data scientist, because with, like platforms like, especially enterprise CDP platforms like Treasure Data, when you get the most out of it is not just what you're using today, but also what you could potentially make out of decisioning tomorrow. So being able to apply things like your own custom models, whether you're using Python or R or whatever it is to help make predictions like sales predictions or churn predictions, whatever it is going forward. Every business will be different. And so they will have their own tailored models. We provide a bunch of sort of templatized ones, but a data scientist who can delve more into that can really help a business accelerate the value and the ROI that they're getting out of Treasure Data or any sort of CDP. And really lastly, of course, every project needs one, but you need a very good project manager. I'd say that much. Somebody who can manage all of the tasks day to day, all of the internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, and make sure that the project keeps moving forward. I would say those are probably the 4 key roles that would be required.
I just want to add to that, Diran. I think that's lovely. And I think part of it is that data science responsibility within it. I'd want to layer on to that responsibility for the KPIs and measurement. In the kind of research report that I quoted from earlier, the CMOs reported measuring marketing ROI as the #1 barrier to moving things forward. And so often you see clients want to approach this in a very linear way. We're going to work on the data, we're going to do our use cases, we're going to get things rolled out, and then we're going to address measurements, something we do next, and you never get to it. So build that measurement in with your data science person on that team from day one. Even if it's crude measurement, build it up from day one, I think is really important and vital when you're trying to future-proof, because if you can't prove success today, nobody's going to trust your decisions when it comes to future. So build that measurement into that team, and having that data science person there, I think, is part of that.
Perfect. I was going to go back to the poll question. There's a couple of comments around that, and obviously in terms of the data-driven marketing maturity model. And what I'd like to get from you both is the kind of momentum behind all this customer data platform technology at the moment. Obviously, we've just had Big Data London in person. There's some very busy sessions talking about this sort of stuff. Treasure Data did a couple of very good sessions on it. If we'd asked that question, that poll question 2 or 3 years ago, would the results have been different? Are people getting more mature at the moment? What's driving this interest in this technology, do you think? I'll go with you, David, first in terms of that.
It's a really interesting question. I think one of the things that's kept me kind of working at Acxiom for 20 years is that the goalposts keep on moving. And it might feel a bit frustrating, but I think if we'd asked that same question 3 years ago, 5 years ago, the results probably would have been a bit similar. That there would be the companies that are probably perhaps lagging behind a bit in terms of maturity levels. That's that W shape I described. The companies that feel like they're doing okay, well enough, and then the ones that have clearly invested in their data and tech strategy and their skill sets in organization structures and are leading the pack. But I think the expectations of what it takes to be in that leading space are continually moving on. So it's kind of that it's never over. And I think that's part of our theme here with future-proofing. It's not something that you do today and then walk away from. If you establish your practices right around your customer experience strategy, around your tech skills, around your end users like data science people that we've just been speaking about, the governance around it, so from security and data privacy and getting the right program management, that rolls on for every new thing your marketeers want to do as markets evolve. It means you're ready. So 2 years ago, ahead of COVID, it means you would be the organization that was ready to make a rapid switch to e-commerce. It means you would be the organization that would be ready to make a rapid switch in your supply chain if it gets disrupted. And I think that's what future-proofing means, for me at any rate. So I would like to think that if we ask the same poll question in 3 or 5 years' time, we'd probably see the same shape results. But yeah, the organizations that are at that top end are the ones that can adapt. Perhaps the ones that are down the bottom end will be a different set of organizations because they've kind of gone bust or been bought or whatever. They're no longer there. And there's some new entrants that are still coming into that evolution. That's my thoughts on it in anyway.
Yeah.
And,
yes. Yeah. No, indeed. I think that's a good place to leave it, actually, in terms of, I think that really covers the title and the concepts that we're going through with the future proofing and stuff. I'd like to say before we say goodbye, thank you to you both for an excellent discussion. Really enjoyed it. It was very, very slick, and obviously lots of work gone into it. So thank you from me, thank you from the audience, and to the audience. We'll see you at the next one, and thanks, guys. We'll see you very soon. All right, cheers.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.